for me, it's a commemoration. I guess it's also a reflection on the last 4 or 5 years collaboration with Bosch Foundation on this project. Since this is sort of like academic, journalistic setting, I want to give it more like a academic flavor, so to speak. Have capped with certain kind of academic reflections. So I have 3 parts. Each part, usually I spend like half a day to talk about each part. So you give me 1.5 days to cover all those things. But I try to be brief, in 15 minutes. If I can't do that, I don't know. I will skip a lot of stuff, right? There's PowerPoint there. You probably can see it. So I have 3 parts: the theoretical reflections, how we're going to try to do this, why we want to do this, this kind of image thing. I usually feel very suspicious of the concept of image or 形象. I think in the US context, people don't really use this word, image. They prefer something like attitude or perception. I would think attitude it's a better choice of word, because really it's sort of subjective feelings, how you feel about the country. But anyway, here's my first part. We have to have a certain kind of theoretical reflections on the issue. This is a pretty big framework. Think about China in the Chinese exceptionalism. That's what I've been doing over the last 20 years or so. And the concept of the so-called universalism, which is sort of Western dominated. And then, think about China as part of the world. This is very critical. China's, especially modern China. We're not talking about the ancient China. And then if we want to talk about global China, this concept of global China, it really derives from a cultural appeal and leadership. Really not really based on the interest-driven alliances. So, those are sort of theoretical basis. And the goal is to establish common values of humanity, integrating Western-led universalism and all traditions of diversity and difference. And towards that goal, China needs to further open up and reforming cultural and intellectual arena to make Chinese voices an integral part of the world culture. Okay. And those are just showing some of the Western values or universal values, and see the differences. And those are Chinese values. Yeah, I don't have to go over with that because that's not what I want to do. I think you guys read Chinese, you figure out, right? If you don't read Chinese that well, you see the images, right? Yeah. Okay. I think there'll be interesting dialogues, conversations between these Chinese values and the universal values. I remember we touched on the issue of values, right? What will be the basis for conversation? Yeah. Then, I'll move to the next section. That's about the public opinion service. That's the survey by BBC immediately after the Olympics. It's called Global Scan, and you see the result. Before the Olympics, China's image was better. After Olympics, somehow it's getting worse. And then we have the Global Attitude Survey from the Pew. And this is what I have been doing since 2009. It's ongoing survey projects. We started with the United States, and we try to cover many areas, continents, as much as possible. We covered Asian, 13 plus countries and areas. And then we also did special survey for India. And then Latin American, we surveyed like 26 Latin American countries. And that's kind of ongoing. We had the data collected 2012. And, we had every 2 years we did one survey. So there's some interesting findings. This is all our survey in the US. So generally speaking, the US public think that the US-China relationship is okay. It's not that bad. Then here comes the problem of values. I try to figure out what exactly underpins the public opinion survey and how public opinion is swayed by a variety of factors. And this is one of them. This is kind of interesting, somehow a slight majority think China has, this is of course our 2011 survey, a slight majority of the American public think that China had a system that works, political system that works for China. And then the other way around, you find overwhelming majority think that China's political system doesn't really work very well because it holds its political rights from the citizens. So you have this contrasting two images, right? And then we have interesting slides. I don't really want to spend too much time on this. Then we have the survey of Asian countries and areas, including Taiwan. This is somehow, we also surveyed China, how you figure the influential countries in the world. Which country has the most influence in Asia? Seems like, the China's neighboring countries like Vietnam and Mongolia, I think China has much stronger influence, whereas Southeast Asian countries like the Philippines, they don't really think China is that influential compared to the United States. Interestingly, those countries who think China had the most influence usually hold a pretty negative view about that influence. By contrast, those countries like Philippines who do not think China had very strong influence usually are more positive about that influence. So we have to explain why. Anyway, there's discussions about the development models and so on. I stop there. If we have further questions, we can talk about this. And then I want to show you some of the results or reflections of what we have been doing with Bosch Foundation, in terms of media exchange. There's several ways of doing the, public, the so-called public diplomacy or soft power promotion and the exchange in terms of the media. There are several ways, just using this, the Chinese metaphor. If you build a ship, you can just sell your stuff, right? And you can borrow your ship, If you build a ship, it's like 70 years practice of external propaganda. This is what we call the Weixuan. And then we have Konfuzius-Institut. That's part of the building your own ship. And then we have 40 billion RMB for Chinese international media channels. Yeah, China really spent lots of money on doing this. And of course, you can doing the other way around. You can borrowing ship. For example, the Nobel Prize Mo Yan, really Chinese government didn't pay a penny to promote him. It's really through the U.S. translators, U.S. sinologists, critics. And of course, there's transnational Chinese cinema, the contemporary arts, and so on and so forth. Now, the red part is what I have been doing. It's called the Initiatives of Public Diplomacy, scholars-led. This is what we call, it sounds better in Chinese, but in English, I try to translate it in English. So it's called scholars-led, media participating, government supporting. In Chinese, it's called 学者主导，媒体参与，政府支持. This sort of model. I see Haifeng is smiling there, because Oliver and Haifeng, you were part of this whole project. So we had this. We started with Chengdu, and then we have a Berlin, and then we have Nanjing. So we have 3 rounds. Yeah. And then I have some images. And apart from this, European China, we call it ECME, European China Media Exchange. I have other projects like in Middle East. I don't want to spend time talking about Middle East, but anyway. Something about the Chengdu. Anyway, we cannot open them. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. What happened in Chengdu is we invited a whole bunch of journalists from Europe. A significant number of them come from Germany. And that's really sort of pioneering project. We spent like a week in Chengdu, engaging in discussions, actually visit all the different sites. On the part of the Chengdu government, that's a promotion, right? On the part of European journalists, that's a rare opportunity to get access to a local, provincial capital. Usually the journalists stationed in Beijing, or they sometimes go to Shanghai, but they don't really have access. The access is a critical issue for journalists. So both sides are very happy about this. And then we try to redo it in Nanjing. And in Nanjing, we're doing pretty fine. And then we have lots of interesting experience in Nanjing as well. Because what happened in Nanjing, when the journalists came to Nanjing, there's a political problems going on, the political scandals, I would say. There's a major shakeup of the Nanjing government. The Nanjing mayor is supposed to open up a welcoming ceremony, but just 1 week before he would come to the opening up ceremony, he was put in jail. So instead, his rival, the party secretary, stepped up. But the party secretary, now think back, he's very brief. He said, I would like to do this. So he came up. And then he had like a 1.5 hour interview with all the journalists. I believe the first question, we try to figure out which one, which media is kind of more friendly to China, asking the question. Finally, we get a journalist from Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung asking the first question. It's a pretty sharp question. The first question addressing to the party secretary is, what is your assessment of the mayor's downfall? You know what? The party secretary was very happy, grabbing this opportunity. For an hour and a half, he granted us 1 hour time, so he's supposed to speak for half an hour, right? Stretched over to like almost double the time. Yeah. I look at my watch. Don't worry. I look at my watch all the time. And the party secretary launched a really vicious attack on his colleague, the mayor. He said, he's a cancerous cell. Once we perform a surgery, remove the cancer cell, our party is healthier than ever. And then I think Deutsch Tibet, the journalist asked, how do you see you perform a surgery? Because he's only detained, right? You haven't really started the procedure of trying yet. How to do that? I think the party secretary ignored that part. He didn't really respond to. So, but anyway, our purpose is not to talking about political scandals. The theme is to discover Nanjing and the Nanjing's city construction, Nanjing's local people. But we're not doing this very, very interesting conversation. By the way, before I end, I just have one more word about this the sustainability of such a project. I think it's a good project. It's sort of a win-win situation. The journalists on the West are very happy about this, and the Chinese government, they get what they want to get, right? But nowadays, if you want me to reflect on this, I feel this really depends on the timing. So timing is critical and depends on the people. I worked with the party secretaries of Chengdu to start a Chengdu project there. Party secretary of Chengdu, Li Chuncheng, is a very smart guy. Then party secretary of Nanjing, Yang Weizhou, both are very smart guy. Once our project was completed, a year later, they were both in jail. So I end my notes there. So, that's sort of my reflection on this. Thank you.